city of Wilsonville, which began operations in 1969. It is also the 20th anniversary of South Metro Area Rapid Transit System, founded in 1989. I'm very honored to serve as the 8th mayor of the city of Wilsonville since its inception 4 decades ago. I am challenged to follow in the footsteps of prior leaders who have worked diligently and effectively to make Wilsonville a better place. Wilsonville is still a young city in terms of formal organization. Yet several themes which recur throughout our history, there are several themes which recur throughout our history, both before and after the city's incorporation. These themes include the arrival of people here due to a perceived business opportunity, the nexus here of transportation routes and modes, the belief that this place will be a good place to build our lives, and the wish for self-determination and local control over our individual and collective futures. Let's look back at a little bit of Wilsonville history to gain some perspective. Boone's Landing was founded by Alfonso Boone in 1846. He was the grandson of famed frontiersman Daniel Boone. The ferry operations across the river started a year later and were carried on for many years by Alfonso's son Jesse. The community was renamed Wilsonville in the year 1870 after U.S. Postmaster Charles Wilson. By the early 1900s, steamboats were the primary transportation method along the Willamette River. Early in the 1900s, 1907, the Oregon Electric Railway opened and provided regular north-south service into Portland as well as to points south. Eventually, Boone's Ferry Road, also known as the Market Road, was paved, but only the northbound lane where the heavily loaded wagons carried freight from the ferry landing. By the mid-1900s, transportation issues were major, and the I-5 freeway, called the Baldock Freeway, was opened, which ended ferry service. In 1960, Thunderbird Mobile Court was opened on the east side of the freeway, and in 61, the Damage State Mental Hospital was opened on the opposite side. In the late 60s, 1969, architect Phil Balsinger and the J.C.'s Club of Wilsonville petitioned for creation of a city. At that point, the population was something between 900 and 1,000 people. A vote was taken in October of 1968. There were 183 votes in favor of creating a city and 163 votes opposed. There was a strong local interest in control over growth patterns and land uses in the Wilsonville area, and there was some unhappiness with county government administration. There was also a focus on leveraging development to create a strong economic tax base and the desire for civic betterment. The city was incorporated and the first council met on January 10th, 1969. The mayor was Phil Balsinger, our own member Debbie Lau's father. The council consisted of Bill Bruck, Bill Montgomery, Glenn Cumberland, and Walt Whaler, Doris Whaler's husband. Doris was the first city recording secretary. City operations were centered in the Toshman House, which still sits at the ferry landing at the base of Boone's Ferry Road. The Burns brothers opened a truck stop in North Wilsonville. Note the transportation connection. The area was primarily agricultural, consisting mostly of hazelnut orchards and hayfields. Lowry's grocery store was the commercial center, located at the corner of Boone's Ferry and Wilsonville Road, just north of Boone's Ferry Primary School, which had been built in 1959. A limited number of other businesses existed in Wilsonville, including Wilsonville Concrete, Metalcraft, Gaylord Industries, a couple of gas stations, the Silverleaf Inn, and Mr. Rogers' Cafe. Wilsonville's first decade essentially was the 1970s, when Oregon faced a growth boom. Charbonneau began construction as Oregon's first planned community. It consisted of a plan for 1,700 housing units to house 3,700 residents. Within 2 years, Charbonneau's location on prime agricultural land led Governor Tom McCall to introduce Senate Bill 100, which, when enacted, became the basis for Oregon's land use planning system. In 1973, Tektronix bought property on the east side of the freeway and began developing their corporate headquarters. Tech eventually became Xerox Office Group, today Wilsonville's largest employer with 1,560 employees. In that year also, the Wilsonville Chamber of Commerce was established, primarily led by local architect Stam Johnson, who had designed Wilsonville Primary School, and assisted by member Jack Cole, a local builder many of you know. City Hall was moved into a new location, a mobile trailer sitting on Parkway Avenue near where the Best Western Motel now is. Payless Drug Store came to Wilsonville in '78 and built a warehouse for distribution. It was 508,000 square feet, then the largest building in the state. This required the installation of the first stoplight in Wilsonville, which Payless also covered the cost of. Our second school, Wood Middle School, was built in '79, and the city first contracted for Clackamas County Sheriff's Services to be our police. Our second decade as a city was the 1980s, when Wilsonville started to become a real city. Initially, population was about 2,900 residents. In late 1980, the city needed to begin a major expansion of the wastewater treatment plant, which was rudimentary before that time due to growth considerations. In '82, the city adopted the first concurrency growth management policy, requiring that plans and funding for city infrastructure must be in place prior to new development proceeding. The first library also opened in a 1,200 square foot modular building adjacent Boone's Ferry Primary. A year later, in '83, a new City Hall building was constructed, which we now call the Old City Hall, which currently houses the Public Works Department and our Police Department. A year later, the Wilsonville Community Center was constructed, and 3 years after that, the new library was opened in its current location. It was 70,500 square feet, 6 times the size of the initial library, and built with bonds approved in the 1987 vote. At about this time, the recession started to end for Oregon, and a housing boom started. Oregon was about 2 years behind most other West Coast states. The final year of the decade saw the city withdraw from TriMet and create WART, for those of you that have been around, the Wilsonville Area Rapid Transit System. This provided more services for local residents and businesses at half the tax rate that they had been paying to TriMet. Metro Graphics began construction of their campus, where they are still located in Wilsonville, and are now our second largest employer with about 1,100 employees. At the start of Wilsonville's third decade, the 1990s, we faced growth pressures from all sides. The population was about 7,100. Town Center Shopping Center opened in '91, and the city hired Arlene Lobel as city manager, still our city manager. A year later, Incredible Universe opened. You now know it as Fry's, and suddenly traffic surged to levels predicted for the year 2010, 18 years in the future. 1995 saw the opening of Wilsonville High School, and in '96 the City Council adopted a public facilities strategy under Oregon state law to manage traffic congestion and avoid being forced into an outright building moratorium.